Welcome to our webinar 4 of the Life Transforming series. This is again a very crucial webinar and what I call the foundation webinars. By the foundation webinars, we mean webinars 1 to 4. If you're someone here that has been on some of webinar 1 to 4 or not watched any part of webinars 1 to 4, I invite you to please watch any part of them that you haven't yet watched. Please be sure to catch up on it. And webinar 4, webinar 1, we looked at our limiting beliefs. First, distinguish what's in the brain before we can replace it or top it up with some new intellect, with some new wisdom, with some new knowledge, with some new capabilities. And we had to distinguish limiting beliefs to get them out the space. Webinar 2 was really looking about habit forming, creating your design a day, your design a week, and a pathway to a vision that we create. Webinar 3 was our start at looking at metabolism. Like, what are these chemical processes and biological processes? And tell me about the maths and the physics of transforming your body, whatever your starting point is, to get you to what optimal is. Now, this beautiful quote here by Michael Hyatt, which is, don't fear failure, fear being in the exact same place next year as you are today, right? What does that mean? And we say this because next week, in theory, we have a break week, which means we don't have a technical content webinar. But in past challenges, we have had a coach or a head coach. They may want to run an optional drop-in session at this time of the webinar. So, Coach Gira, by the way, I don't know if you had something planned for that, but just to let you know that that's an option. That was something that was started in January. You don't have to. We can chat about it later. But at this time next week, there is no webinar, but we do sometimes bring on an optional meet your leaders or get to meet people from other business units within FITBANKER, because a lot of people do this program and think and get a sense that, hey, it's just this program, but there is a universe of FITBANKER opportunities and offerings that you can be part of to really work on your well-being on the multiple pillars, on multi-dimension, beyond just the well-being side or the physical and mental side that we look here. There's also an emotional resilience program. There are leadership programs that we run. There are in-person retreats and opportunities for you to join in person. But think about you at the end of day 90. And we've had that for some of you who are maybe on the Jan program. And after the Jan program, you reach the end and you think, oh, I shoulda, coulda done this so diligently. I shoulda, coulda ensured I just showed up every week. I shoulda, coulda ensured I managed, just say, the steps. Or I shoulda, coulda enjoyed or participated in all the webinars, right? And what happens is that some people watch 2, 3, 4, they miss 1 or 2, and they go into some kind of guilt trip, which is like, I've missed one too many, I'll just stop going to the webinars. And then you're on the chat, you're interacting there, and you don't get the full depth of the program. So I really invite you guys, wherever you are with your level of participation, every webinar can be watched and participated in as a standalone. But also, if we don't connect at a big group level, like we do on a webinar, it's very easy to be at the effect of your environments that you then go to, your community, and your weekly conversations. So if they're not with coaches, if they're not on a webinar, they will be with whatever environments and communities you expose yourself to. And that may or may not be a positive thing. So it's for you to discover based on who, where, and when you interact. Now, before we go into today's session and look at what today's webinar is about, which is, again, really important technical stuff to understand the science of exercise, fat loss, types of nutrition / diet, or certain principles of it. I'd love one of you, as we've had, to unmute the mic and powerfully read this out. So who would like to do that? Coach Mashkur, are you nominating?
I'm gonna nominate Dave Mulenga. Come on, Dave.
You there?
Dave's there. Dave's been busy on his spin bike at home 2-3 times a day. So,
are we there, Davi?
And if he's not there, I don't mind doing it.
Come on, Dave, before Mandip takes over. Come on, Dave. Show up. Let me down, man.
There's Dave. Sorry, might be in the middle of something. Mandeep, go for it.
Dave's going for dinner for his kid's birthday.
The Life Transforming Series.
Yeah.
Welcome to life. Objective. At the end of this challenge, I will be someone who has altered my own relationship to food, exercise, and myself. Number 2, understands the real role of my body, mind, and intellect. Number 3, knows that my environment, community, and conversations dictate the consistency and quality of my health habits. And number 4, inspires and empowers my community to take on their help too, through my social media and in-person sharing, to show up as a health leader and a go-to person. The more I normalize and share what I value, my healthy lifestyle, in person or on social media, the more the world around me is inspired and empowered to start living a healthy lifestyle. Thank you.
And everything is transformable, the last bit. So Mandeep, tell us, which of these objectives, any one of them, are you beginning to see shift for you, or you've caused transformation in, or you've had some realization in any one of them?
Okay, so I went on a birthday run with Amir or Muksur. Sorry if I'm not saying your name properly, Amir. Moshkur. Sorry, I've known him always as Amir, so I'm finding it hard to even know how to read the name. But anyway, I'm learning. And he challenged me. I said I just wanted to lose weight for my brother's wedding by the beginning of September. And he said, that's not big enough. And yeah, I haven't quite stepped into a bigger reality yet, because honestly, that's all I really do want to do is lose weight, tone up, look good. But I'm up for the challenge of changing the conversation and I guess upping my game.
Awesome. Awesome. So you really want to really look at, as you're doing that, it might be, altering your relationship to food, to exercise, and yourself, or even understanding the real role of my body, mind, and intellect. Like there is a view or a context as to how we relate to our body or our view of ourselves, right? And this might be to do with body, with appearance, with whatever. And
well, my main thing was sweetness, changing my view on, sweet foods, because I get a lot of pleasure from sweet things.
Okay, cool. So we are going to be looking at in a webinar. What we have to first distinguish is we can't transform what we consume just by shifting the options. You have to transform the relationship to it. So if the relationship, this is a sugar-free drink. If the relationship is I love sugar or I love sweet stuff, I can still have something sweet, but now because it's functional, I've transformed the relationship from taste-based alone to taste-based and functional, right? So now this is functional because it doesn't impact my blood sugar, doesn't create a blood sugar spike and a crash. And also we can look at food, what food is functional to us, what fulfills and plays a particular role inside of us. And that's one of the many relationships we'll be looking at in some of the upcoming webinars. What are the various other relationships? By documenting and recording and macro tracking our food, we form subconsciously a numerical relationship to food. So you look at a particular drink, you look at a particular snack, you just know the serving size. Over time, it starts to be ingrained in your subconscious. You tend to then subconsciously choose or not exceed a certain serving size or portion, or realize this type of food, this size, this weighting would actually blow my calories, blow my macros. And that's how we start to rewire our relationship to food, amongst many other ways. Today, we're going to look at some of them around food. But before we do, I want to just flag values. We spoke about this earlier, and this will be something you're going to reuse in your coaching calls. And why do we use values? Values give us direction. So if you are going in a certain trajectory, how do we get you back on track? And one of the things that has us go off track is some form of performance, because you're attached, say, to an outcome. You're attached to reward. You're attached to recognition. You're attached to acknowledgement. And when you don't get that, you get disempowered and you go into non-performance. So you go into self-sabotage or progress over perfection. Many of us might be hoping at this point in the program, I've lost 4 kg and you've lost 2.8. And 2.8 is great if you want to lose weight. But it's progress, and progress over perfection. But also you got to give up the perception that there's some form of perfect, because no matter what state of physique you get to, it changes in a day itself. It changes overnight, right? So it's about staying within a certain realm. It's about maintaining a certain range of performance, a certain range of strength, a certain range of body composition, but keeping it within the optimal range. There are various other values, so we won't go over all of them, but you will be going over these with your coaches. So it is important you have these as a screenshot, these 6 values. Coaches, you should share these on all of your individual coaching chats. And participants, I invite you to get familiar with them, because from time to time, a coach will be asking you, well, what value was missing, or what value can you stand in to really be able to progress or move or let go or transform that particular area that you've been stopped in or not gotten a particular result. So that's how values give us direction on track. They can get us progress further. They can get us out of a state of inertia, right? They can get us to avoid going into some form of self-sabotage. So very important that we know how to leverage these, but these form, like I say, your transformation is a function of ECC, environment, community, conversations. Your conversations will be based on, amongst other things, like looking at your stats and your progress, they will be based on values. And so now there is a way to really look at how you're acknowledging your actions or your inaction and distinguishing what values to apply or what was missing. Now, here's something where I want all of us to get present to what it really takes to lose weight. Some of us, like I say, talking about attachment to a particular outcome or practicing detachment, what does it take? What does it look like to lose 10 kg fat? Many of us might want to easily lose 10 kg fat, and you might think it's only 10 kg. Why am I not losing 10 kg of fat? Well, this is the formula to lose it. You got to first add something to it to form a new piece of matter or 2 pieces of matter, and then remove those pieces of matter, right? Remember, energy is never destroyed. It's never created. It only transforms state, right? Going back to your physics, energy cannot just disappear or cannot just appear. It can only alter state. So if you have fat, the chemical name and definition of fat is adipose tissue. And the formula is carbon, 55 molecules, hydrogen, 104, and 6 oxygen. And combined in that particular ratio, you form tissue. And that tissue, how do we break it down? One of the ways we break that down is we add new molecules to it and combine them to them. Those new molecules form other molecules and other states of matter that are released from the body. So to fat, when you inhale through exercise, you're breathing in oxygen and you get 78 molecules of oxygen, which is about 29 kg in weight. Now, to inhale 29 kg in weight is obviously a number of days of calculating how much you're inhaling. That, when we exercise, converts to 2 things. The oxygen combines with the carbon molecules and forms CO2. Carbon and the oxygen forms 55 CO2 molecules, which is 8.4 kg in your fat being released, and about 19.6 is your carbon dioxide. So 19.6 kg worth of carbon dioxide is what you exhale. And 1.6 kg of that fat that you had stored in your body gets released as water, which is 9.4 liters or 9.4 kg of that sweat or water or liquids leaving your body. So if you want to know how much you lose, if there was a way you could measure all liquid coming out of your body, or you could sweat out a liter or 1.6 liters of sweat from your body, right, you will be losing 10 kg. Now, most of you will know and note and see that, yes, you might find your floor drenched around you when you're working out, but it will be nowhere near in a day or in a workout to a liter, right? But to lose a liter, you could lose up to 10 kg of body fat. So it's important to bring a little bit of patience, understanding the math of what it takes to create that particular fat loss. So very important for you to understand what it takes to lose it, but also it's important for you to be mindful of the sting factor, the self-sabotage of how quickly you can add back. 250 grams of carbohydrates that we consume in a day. Remember, some of us were calculating our carb number. It was 60 for some people, 55 grams. It was 70, it was 80. It was 100 grams for some people. depending on what we discussed on the Friday lunch or Friday night surgeries. But if you consume 250 grams of carbs, that in addition to water intake plus oxygen that you breathe in, can lead to 1 kg in weight gain in a day, literally within a day. So 250 grams of carbohydrates, right, which means net carbs in a particular food, whatever version of food you're consuming, 250 grams of those carbs can easily convert to 1 kg in your increased body weight. So if you've put on some weight in a day, or even from morning to evening, our body weight changes. Like mine can change 1 kg to 1.5 kg in a day. Like my morning weight is always the lightest, and my go to bed time weight is high. When I sleep, my weight reduces as I lose weight through sweating in my sleep, or through perspiration or condensation through my mouth, through my breath coming out, or through my nose. And as a result, the next day I am slightly lighter. So it's very important for us to understand that particular science. Now, that said, I mentioned next week is a break week. So there isn't a technical webinar. There is no webinar 5. This is webinar 4. Webinar 5 is happening 2 weeks from now. And the webinar 2 weeks from now, you and friends and family can come to it. So if you've been liking what you've been listening to so far, if you're doing this program and you have a wife or a husband or kids or a parent where you think this could really serve them, or I know this colleague at work, it's been politically incorrect for me to speak to them about the well-being issue that they're dealing with, so I've never had the courage to speak to them about it. You have a week and a half to have conversations with this person and let them know that, hey, I'm doing this thing called FITBANKER Challenge, and I would love for you to join a trial webinar and see kind of what the learning is like. Because webinar 5, for those of you that have Encore, you can type in the chat how insightful webinar 5 is. Some of you might have joined the FITBANKER community because you came to a webinar 5. This is where we look at food myths. We debunk certain food myths or certain practices around food. And that one is happening on 2 Tuesdays from now, which is 20th May. So what you have on screen, by the way, you can screenshot. This is like an invite that you can send to them. It's on 20th May. And then there's one, webinar 6 is on the mind-body connection, which Dr. Ambika Sampat runs. And for those of you that haven't interacted with her, she'll be running that webinar, one of 2 webinars that she runs over this 90-day program. And that webinar also, for people that you'd like to invite people to discover more about mind-body connection, they can join that particular webinar as well. Now, before every challenge, we have masterclasses. So our June challenge is starting, I think it's the first or second week of June. And there's the first prep webinar for people to find out about that is on 15th May. Note the time, guys. These are different timings. The webinar is at 5:30 p.m. UK time, and the masterclasses, while we start at 6:30, because you have guests coming for the guest evening, there will be 30 minutes of them coming on, us introducing a little bit about FITBANKER, welcoming and acknowledging them, finding out a bit about them, and then 30 minutes in, we go into your technical content. So it is a technical webinar. It is one of the learning webinars you learn from, but the first 30 minutes are for your guests. So if you have a guest, join with them for the first 30 minutes. Thereafter, as usual, it'll be an hour to an hour, 15 minutes for the rest of the technical content webinar. So this is a screenshot you can take to use to invite family, friends, colleagues. And this is also another invite you can use, which is, again, something you could share and forward with screenshot with family, friends, and colleagues. Now, you have to register on this particular link, including you as a participant, bit.ly/FPX90MC. So it won't be on this 132 link, which is the webinar number 5, 2 weeks from now, and webinar 6, 3 weeks from now. Okay, so webinar 3 recap. We had a very quick, we covered some of these assignments, reviewing these assignments on the Friday lunch surgeries. So I do recommend that when you guys come to the surgeries, it's a great place for you to discover and learn, what did people get out of the assignments. It was some great shares last week around what people saw happen to their weight or didn't happen to their weight by taking on these particular assignments. So please do use and leverage those. Webinar 4, what are we looking at? Understanding what we call types of exercise, and also understanding the physics of muscle growth, and to create effective, impactful workouts. And then we've never been consider we've never been taught how to eat. We just grow up and it's breakfast and somebody has a cereal box in front of you and a bowl of milk and a jug of milk and they pour it into a bowl and they add the cereal and we're just conditioned to eat that way, not knowing whether that's the right way to eat or the right time to eat or the right content or ingredients to eat. We are just inherited and practicing what maybe our parents inherited or saw on very powerful marketing media or their favorite sitcom. And they say that in the sitcom, they think this is what happens in the US. This is how we should have our table set up. This is the kind of stuff we should have on our table. They lay it out that way. We consume that particular food. And then we wonder why we are dealing with certain inflammatory diseases or lethargy or sluggishness. Now, when you talk of types of exercise, there are two types of exercise activity. One is called cardiovascular activity or cardio, also known as aerobic. The other one is anaerobic or resistance training. Now, aerobic simply means in the presence of oxygen. Anaerobic means in the absence of oxygen. So this is after the oxygen has been used up or before the oxygen reaches the muscle to fuel the muscle. So aerobic means your energy is coming through and supplied by and fueled by a source of oxygen. And so when you're doing cardiovascular activity, that's also good for your heart health, but your whole cardiovascular system of your arteries and your veins. And to keep that, well, cardio is defined as something that we can do for a sustainably long period of time, where we are able to drip feed the energy to support the consumption within the body. So think of it as anything you can do for longer than 2 minutes, whether you're going for a walk or you're going for a run or you're swimming. That is one of the ways for you to experience aerobic energy. Anaerobic, right? This is mostly resistance training or weight-based training or even your body weight training. We'll look at some of the types of resistance training. Now think of aerobic as Mo Farah going for a run. Long distance, 5,000 meters, 10,000 meters. He can do this for, keeping a steady pace and his pace. That too is pretty fast. If you look at anaerobic is before oxygen reaches the muscle or after it's run out, right? So think of Usain Bolt. Like he's sprinting for 9.9 seconds. And that might come from localized energy stored in his muscles, right? So there are two types of localized energy. One is called the phosphocreatine system, and that gives you energy for up to 10 seconds. Thereafter, you tap into a new energy system, which is again closer to and within and near your muscles, called the lactic energy system. That is any activity that can be fueled for 10 seconds and up to 2 minutes, right? That short phase of exercise demand can be fueled by somewhat localized energy through anaerobic or resistance training. All right, now what we call as cardio or cardiovascular, different types, all of these count, whether it's walking or jogging or running or cycling or swimming or yoga or even a HIIT workout, is called LIS. Low intensity, steady state. This is where your heart rate will be going at about 60% of your maximum heart rate. Certain classes are designed around the science of HIIT. Year after year, they look at the most effective way to trigger fat loss, the most effective exercise that kind of contributes to rebooting your metabolism, the most effective exercise that's good for heart health and cardio health, and it's often some form of HIIT training. So boxing, Zumba, F45, Orange Theory, these are all examples of exercise and workouts that are designed around this particular science. And what the science is doing or does is it triggers in your body what's called EPOC, excessive post-exercise oxygen consumption. And many of you might have read articles or you see these pop-ups on the internet, which is do this type of exercise and you will see, do this type of exercise and you will burn fat in your sleep or at your desk at work, right? That is if you trigger in the workout EPOC, excessive post-exercise oxygen consumption. How much cardio should you do? Well, it's recommended to do 30 to 60 minutes daily. What we recommend in the FITBANKER community during FITBANKER challenges, 40 to 90 minutes a day of some form of LIS. So this could be 90 minutes of cumulative walk time. It could be a 45-minute walk in the morning, 45-minute walk later in the day. It could be 1 hour walk in the morning. After your last meal, go for a 30-minute walk. In addition to that, all the other steps that you do, they count. So try not to be stationary and sat all day. Try to get up, stand, walk a bit. All those steps add to LIS. And when you're using Runkeeper or you're tracking it on an app, I propose always recommending recording those activities that you're doing for at least 5 minutes or at least 500 meters. Because if it's going from here to the kitchen to the toilet, you will be running your Runkeeper, and it's too short a distance to give you anything meaningful and accurate. And so I propose that when you do cardio, there are three things to do to have that cardio be effective. And to have that cardio be effective and trigger what we call thermogenesis, is you have to achieve three things. One is, are you pushing hard enough to get your heart rate to about 70% of your max HR and up to 90% of your max HR? Within that range, you will trigger thermogenesis. And the second thing you want to do is, are you struggling to get the breath in fast enough to supply the fuel? And that is breathing hard or breathing faster, right? You might even get to breathlessness that you need to pause, bend over, you got your hands on your knees, and you're trying to recoup and take that oxygen back in. And the third one is body temperature. Are you raising your body temperature? Because your metabolism is rebooted and fat burns when we can raise what's called our core temperature. And through certain activity and exercise, how do you know you've raised your body temperature? Well, you break sweat, right? And when you break sweat, you want to make sure that that is internally generated heat, because if you're out in Dubai and you're just walking somewhere in Dubai, just the external heat, you will easily raise your body temperature. So these are the things you need to look for, because when we tell people, or people tell us, I've been working out, I go to the gym, I'm very fit, I regularly do this, but nothing seems to be shifting. It's because they're missing out one of these small technical details to effectively trigger thermogenesis. Now, there's what I call the 7 C's to fat loss. So whenever you ask me, hey, what do I need to do to make sure I lose fat on this challenge? I will say, well, you've got to focus on the 7 C's. The 7 C's are cardio. You got to make sure daily you're doing cardio effectively, which is meeting the criteria above, right? 40 to 90 minutes, and trigger those three things to trigger thermogenesis. The second one is carb control. It's not a very solid, hard rule, but if you are, and again, depends on your level of activity and sometimes your body type, but let's just say you are 80 kg and you want to lose weight and you are carb sensitive, I will tell you to consume about 90% of your weight in kilos, but in grams. So if I'm 80 kg, 90% of that number is 72. I will try to not to go over 72 grams of carbohydrates a day. That's why we had some people on last week. They said they were 63 kg. Their goal is to get to 55 kg. And we said, okay, don't go over 50 or 55 grams of carbohydrates per day. And by staying below that, and if you have a carb sensitivity, you won't be adding to the glycogen that we're trying to deplete in the first place. The third C is calorie deficit. Now, doesn't matter how much you exercise, but if you eat it all back up, what you've burnt, you're back at net zero. So it feels like a productive day or a busy day, but you've just been busy. You've not been productive. You've not actually made a difference to your body composition. So, and you don't have to be excessive. So you don't have to cause a very large calorie deficit multiple days in a row, day on day, and then you feel this burnout and emptiness because you're not allowing your glycogen to be replaced. Glycogen is the first store of glucose underneath your skin. And after it's underneath your skin, you got to, if it's not used, it converts into adipose tissue, which is fat. So those are the three C's: is cardio, carb control, and calorie deficit. And the fourth C is you're doing those three consistently. What then are the other three C's? Now, you could be doing all of this perfectly fine, but what are the other three C's? Often, what botches our progress is we're nailing our physical movement and nutrition, but our hormones are messed. And our hormones are messed because we have not tapped into our parasympathetic nervous system. So you need to regularly activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Go into the rest and digest state. So you need to be cool, you need to be calm, you need to be collected. If you're living a day where you're constantly stressed, or even physically induced stress, which is overtraining, constantly on the move, 7 workouts a day in the gym or whatever you're doing, that will be putting your body under stress. Yes, you will find that you're losing fat, but you will likely also be losing muscle, and you won't have enough time for ample recovery. then you'll have a compromised immune system, and then you will be susceptible to injury and so on. So those are the 7 C's. How do you get cool, calm, and collected? We will learn more ways to do that in webinar 6. We will look at things like mindfulness, meditation, journaling, various other practices that you can do, which we will learn in webinar 6. So remember thermogenesis, that's key for you to trigger. And how do you know whether your workout is effective, or are you pushing hard enough? Well, if you're working with me as a PT in person, or you're working with a PT, that PT should be asking you at some point in time, how intense is this? Is it easy? Is it too simple? Can you go on doing this for an hour or 2 hours? And if you say yes, you can go on doing that for 2 hours, then it's likely too easy, right? And if it's likely too easy, then it's not pushing you enough, and you would say on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably a 3 or a 4, right? If it's something where you can do it for about 30, 40 minutes and you think I got to get off, then you're likely pushing at a 6 or a 7. If you're doing it, but you can't go more than 6, 7, 8 minutes, you think you're going to be breathless, you're likely tapping into your fat burning zone, right? So another way of measuring, in addition to your intensity rating, if I asked you your RPE, your rate of perceived exertion, another way to really know how intense it is you look at your heart rate. Now, how do you know your heart rate? Well, it's often a percentage of your maximum heart rate. What's your maximum heart rate? Simply calculated, your maximum heart rate is 220 minus your age, and in there there's a margin of error of about 12, so plus minus 12. And if you are a more accurate calculation is 206.9 minus 2/3 your age, right? So if you're 42 years old, 2/3 of that is 28. 206.9 minus 28 is going to be about 179. So 179 is your max. If 179 is your max, then you should know that you need to trigger or you will trigger thermogenesis somewhere around 70 to 80% of your max heart rate, right? So 40-year-old, I've given the example of 180, and you need to be doing, you need to know your 70% number, you need to know your 80% number, your 90% number. That is a great way for you to trigger thermogenesis. Now, how can you push your heart rate high or make it oscillate within a range? You do what we call a HIIT workout. So you can do a HIIT workout by pushing 2 to 3 minutes, warm up, and then maybe do a 30-second sprint, which is the orange bars. For 30 seconds, you're pushing at a very high intensity. Then the gray bar is a low intensity, maybe 30, 60, or 90 seconds. You're recovering, you're catching your breath back. Then 30 seconds, you again really sprint. Now, you can do this on a treadmill. You can do this on a treadmill where you do sprint. So you might, let's just say you're running paces, 11 kilometers or 12 kilometers per hour. You put it at that speed, you're running. You're running at that speed for 30 seconds. Immediately after 30 seconds, you drop to 6 or 7 kilometers per hour. Then you are walking slightly brisk or fast. You're allowing your breath to recover. You're doing that for about 90 seconds. Again, you push up the speed to 11 or 12, and you're doing that for another 30 seconds. So on, you would be oscillating, doing 6, 7, or 8 such cycles across a workout. And it could just take you 20 minutes to do this. Is a very effective HIIT workout to trigger thermogenesis. Now that's cardio. Now let's look at resistance training. Dorian Yates, who is a 6-time Mr. Olympia, phenomenal guy and guru. He has an amazing gym in Marbella where people, especially the Brits, they love flying over to go train in his gym. And he says the single biggest mistake that most beginners make is putting 100% of their effort into the positive, which is the concentric part of a workout. So I'll give you an example. If this is a dumbbell, pulling this dumbbell up and crunching and contracting my bicep is the concentric part of a repetition, while paying little or no attention to the negative, the eccentric. This is lowering it. So for those of you that joined today's lower body workout, which was pretty intense and good, you'll find that we were doing goblet squats. You're holding a heavy dumbbell here. We would go down slow. And as we go down slow, we're holding there for 2, 3, 4 seconds. And then we don't just push up very quickly. We push up slow. So the concentric and the eccentric part of that workout are both contributing to our muscle transformation. Now, that said, this is anaerobic. What type of anaerobic or resistance trainings count? What are the types there? Well, there's weight-based, like what we do in our workouts, as well as it's on your training program, the PDF. Powerlifting, which is another way of resistance training. CrossFit is another form of resistance training classes. Yoga, although some yoga, when you get too used to it, isn't challenging, especially if you started yoga for weight loss, you've gotten stronger through yoga, you've lost a lot of weight. Guess what? The muscles that used to lift the heavy, overweight body that you were now don't have a challenge because now you're lifting a very light person because you've lost weight. So they can easily support your body weight. So after a point in time, it happens to now not present you with enough resistance. Strength and conditioning, right? So the strength and conditioning workouts that you do are basically the ones we do, the ones that I've been doing at least on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. I've been running those, and those are really good for strength and conditioning. And then some like calisthenics, again, another form of resistance training. Now, you can do resistance training with body weight, like calisthenics or yoga, free weights, which are the dumbbells, or you can use resistance machines, which you find in the gym. Now, when you're training, there are three types of muscle. What is the actual muscle that we can control and influence? It's called skeletal muscle. This is muscle that is attached to the skeleton. So it could be attached to your arm bones. It could be attached to your rib cage, connected to your pelvis, which is your core muscles, your six pack. It could be at the back on either side of your spine, which is your spina erectus muscles, and those are your back muscles. It could be your leg muscles. Muscles are often defined as they go from one bone attached to ligament to another bone over, being spread across a particular joint, right? So for me to fold my bottom arm, the muscle is going from my shoulder down to the top of my forearm bone. So it's going over a joint, which is my elbow, right? So its role is to act as some form of a pulley or cable. So the only thing we work on is skeletal muscle. Two other types of muscle, which are involuntary, which means you can't really control them, they are things like walls of internal organs, like your blood vessels, your stomach, your intestine. That's happening. That's being driven by the unconscious, right? It's part of the magic in your body, and the miracle of life in your body that's happening as you function. And when that stops, when those muscles are no longer working, then it's end of life. Cardiac is obviously your heart muscle. It's only a different category because its texture is slightly different from the earlier two muscles. Now, earlier we spoke about the concentric and the eccentric. Both parts of that movement are important, of a repetition. That's called isotonic contraction. Now, there's also what's called isometric contraction. Isometric contraction is where you hold a particular posture, you keep that posture held, right? And holding that particular posture is what contributes to that muscle building. So today, when we're doing goblet squats, we're holding. Today, when we're doing lower body workout, we're doing wall sits for 45 seconds. That's isometric contraction. We're doing a plank. That's isometric contraction. So all these are examples of isometric contraction. Isometric contraction is also what's used in yoga, things like hatha yoga. And how isometric contraction is different from isotonic is isometric, we have layers of muscles. Isometric works more on the internal muscles. Isotonic works more on the outer or superficial muscles. So it's important for us to work both, right? So in your training program, you need to incorporate concentric, eccentric, as well as the isometric contraction. And we've incorporated them in the plans that we have sent you or the workouts that we do live. Now, you may also hear people say, oh, today I'm working on push, tomorrow I'm working on pull. It is categorizing muscles in their function or form of use. So push muscles, effectively, there's some form of push that you're doing. So you might be pushing a sled. That would be a push muscle workout. Or you might be pushing a bar when doing a bench press. You might be pushing a bar with a cable down, which is a tricep press down. So those push muscles are why we combine something like chest and tricep. Working your chest and tricep are push muscles. Pull muscles are working on your biceps, working on your hamstrings, working on your back muscles. And so back and bis is why we combine them on a certain day. So a great way to allow push muscles to recover is on your rest day, you're working your pull muscles. After your pull muscles, the following day or 2 days later, you're working your push again. So it's a great way to allow the muscle recovery by working on the groups and functionality of the muscles. Now, we're going to play a short video, an educational video by Ted Ed, which explains exactly how muscle functions. So please do tune in and listen in. And then we will go into certain principles. There are 9 principles of fitness, which you need to look at. If I'm not shifting, if I'm not growing muscle, I invite you to consider that some of these principles are missing from your routine. So let's first take a look at this particular video that explains how muscles work.
Muscles. We have over 600 of them. They make up between 1/3 and 1/2 of our body weight. And along with connective tissue, they bind us together, hold us up, and help us move. And whether or not bodybuilding is your hobby, muscles need your constant attention because the way you treat them on a daily basis determines whether they will wither or grow. Say you're standing in front of a door, ready to pull it open. Your brain and muscles are perfectly poised to help you achieve this goal. First, your brain sends a signal to motor neurons inside your arm. When they receive this message, they fire, causing muscles to contract and relax, which pull on the bones in your arm and generate the needed movement. The bigger the challenge becomes, the bigger the brain's signal grows, and the more motor units it rallies to help you achieve your task. But what if the door is made of solid iron? At this point, your arm muscles alone won't be able to generate enough tension to pull it open. So your brain appeals to other muscles for help. You plant your feet, tighten your belly, and tense your back, generating enough force to yank it open. Your nervous system has just leveraged the resources you already have, other muscles, to meet the demand. While all this is happening, your muscle fibers undergo another kind of cellular change. As you expose them to stress, they experience microscopic damage, which in this context is a good thing. In response, the injured cells release inflammatory molecules called cytokines that activate the immune system to repair the injury. This is when the muscle building magic happens. The greater the damage to the muscle tissue, the more your body will need to repair itself. The resulting cycle of damage and repair eventually makes muscles bigger and stronger as they adapt to progressively greater demands. Since our bodies have already adapted to most everyday activities, those generally don't produce enough stress to stimulate new muscle growth. So to build new muscle, a process called hypertrophy, our cells need to be exposed to higher workloads than they are used to. In fact, if you don't continuously expose your muscles to some resistance, they will shrink, a process known as muscular atrophy. In contrast, exposing the muscle to a high degree of tension, especially while the muscle is lengthening, also called an eccentric contraction, generates effective conditions for new growth. However, muscles rely on more than just activity to grow. Without proper nutrition, hormones, and rest, your body would never be able to repair damaged muscle fibers. Protein in our diet preserves muscle mass by providing the building blocks for new tissue in the form of amino acids. Adequate protein intake, along with naturally occurring hormones like insulin-like growth factor and testosterone, help shift the body into a state where tissue is repaired and grown. This vital repair process mainly occurs when we're resting, especially at night while sleeping. Gender and age affect this repair mechanism, which is why young men with more testosterone have a leg up in the muscle building game. Genetic factors also play a role in one's ability to grow muscle. Some people have more robust immune reactions to muscle damage and are better able to repair and replace damaged muscle fibers, increasing their muscle building potential. The body responds to the demands you place on it. If you tear your muscles up, eat right, rest, and repeat, you'll create the conditions to make your muscles as big and strong as possible. It is with muscles as it is with life. Meaningful growth requires challenge and stress.
Awesome, guys. So very important for us to understand those key principles, and the big focus for us should be, are we presenting the resistance and the challenge to muscle to create the micro tears that happen in our muscle? Why is this important? Because a lot of us are lifting weights we're so used to. If you've been lifting 2 kg dumbbells 3 years ago and you're still lifting 2 kg dumbbells, you won't be challenging the muscle. Now, that is the principle here too. The first one is overload principle, no pain, no gain. If your muscle feels no resistance, no load on it, right, it won't grow. It won't create the micro tears. Progressive principle is after a period of time, as your muscle grow into that new zone of lifting your body, you need to be able to adding more of a load to it. So as an example, if you like yoga and you want to increase the resistance with yoga, you either have to increase what's called the TUT, time under tension, so the time and length of that particular pose, or you need to add like a weighted vest or add ankle weights to your yoga or your particular workout if it's just body weight based, to add to the load, to add the progressive principle. Specificity principle. If you're training for London Marathon, and all you're doing is bench press and squatting, you won't be just doing exactly what's needed for the particular day of performance. If you're training for a marathon, you practice running. If you're training for a hike, you go hiking, right? So the training that's most beneficial to people preparing for Kilimanjaro is that they go on a hike. Those of you that went on Seven Sisters hike this weekend looked absolutely amazing. And that is the perfect kind of training you need. And you will see that from your first hike to your second hike to your third hike, by your third hike, you start to call yourself a hiker because your body has already grown and adapted to what at first felt daunting and challenging and too long to do, and how much distance do we have to go, and when will we have our next break, and I'm getting fatigued or cramping or whatever it might be. You start to find, as you start to train for it, nourish yourself, hydrate properly, you get less and less setbacks, and you get more and more stronger, resilient for that. So specificity principle is important. Reversibility. If you're going on a long holiday, you're going for Vipassana, you're unwell, money and its applicability is like, muscle and its applicability is like money in a bank. If it's just sat there and there's no interest, even if there's interest with inflammation, its value reduces. If you don't use it, you lose it and it starts to atrophy. And as it starts to atrophy, it takes a while to rebuild back to where you left off from. But it doesn't take too long, so long you get back into being consistent again. Adaptability. Variety is the flavor of the day, right? So if you're always doing body weight training, just body weight workouts, that's okay for a period, but after a period, your body's now used to you. You've even lost some weight, so it's even easier. It feels easier, but now you're carrying less of a load, right? So when I was 108 kg, think about it, I'm carrying 20 to 30 kg more on me. And my joints, my muscles were built big enough to carry a 108 kg body. When I dropped to 80 kg or 76 when I got to my leanest, right, at that level, now those same muscles, which are already carrying an excess load, they feel a lot more stronger and they occupy a greater percentage of the remaining size of my body. So it's important for us to bring that variety, if it's just body weight, to resistance training or free weights or whatever it may be. Or go for some workouts. Like one of the great ways to create an interrupt when you're in a plateau, which is point number 8. A plateau is where we're training, we're doing the same routine, we're consistent, we're regular, but nothing's shifting, Ronnie. And the reason is because your body has figured out the monotony. It has grown and adapted to execute that routine. But that's why every 5 weeks on the FitBanker challenge, we have what's called a pattern interrupt week. So next week is going to be pattern interrupt week. So tomorrow you will get an email, which is called the 100 rep routine, which means sometimes you don't do 6, 7, 8, 9 exercises. You do 2 or 3 or 4 exercises, maybe just 3, but 100 reps each. And a 300 rep workout is a phenomenal workout for you to do. That's a great way for you to break plateau. For 1 week, you're just doing high volume training. It's called GVT or German volume training, which is another way of shocking your muscles, triggering hypertrophy, and therefore creating muscle growth. Regression after illness, injury, timeout. You might have had muscle atrophy. You might not have your motor neuron connection as efficient and effective, your reflexes as efficient and effective. It takes a while. So don't start off like if you're benching 80 kg, don't just go back to 80 kg. You might have to start from 50 or 60 kg. And after 2 or 3 sessions of being back there, then you may get back to where you left off. 2 types of muscle inflammation we can create. One is with strength training. So this is lifting heavy. And the objective of strength training is to get strong and strong and stronger. Now, this is also one of the trainings where it's useful primarily for competition or for some particular function. It's not helpful. It's it's got more of a risk reward ratio if you're doing this just for constantly trying to get a personal best, but you're not competing, so it's very easy for you to create some form of injury. Now, strength training requires specificity. So it requires focus on specific muscles or a specific exercise that you keep doing 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10 sets. So there are some workouts I've gone to where for the full hour of training, all we're doing is deadlifts, 10 sets of deadlifts. It takes 45 minutes or an hour of just deadlifting. So all you're doing is a good cardio, good warm-up, muscle activation. Then all you're doing is 10 times 10, 10 sets, 10 reps per set of just say deadlifts. That's a great way for me to focus on deadlift. How much should you be lifting? You should be lifting 85% of your 1 rep max, right? How many reps should you be doing? Well, if it's real strength training, you want to lift real heavy, your training phase of the 85% of your max rep is only about 6 reps that you need per set, right? Now, if you are a bit lighter, then 85%, maybe at 60% of your max, 1 rep max, you could be going for the full 10 reps or 10 reps per particular set. And to build a muscle, so if there's a specific muscle you're on this program and you say you want to build it, like you want to build your booty, you want to build your quads, you want to build your chest, across the week, you got to do about or up to 15 sets working on that muscle, 15 sets of exercise. So those of us that did yesterday's upper body workout, we had flies, we had dumbbell press, so we had 7 sets of that. Now, later in the week, if I want to build that muscle, I got to have another 7 to 8 sets dedicated on my chest, right? Now, we did shoulders, we did triceps, we did chest yesterday. But how do you, if you want to build your chest, I got to make sure within the week, again, I get in another 6, 7, or 8 sets dedicated to that particular muscle. How much protein do you need? Whether it's strength training or hypertrophy, you need 1 to 1.5 grams per kg of body weight for a female, 1.5 to 2 grams per kg of, well, it's actually body mass. So this often refers to your lean body mass, which means your body weight excluding the excess fat. But for simplicity, we just say go by your full body weight and we give you a range, because any excess protein that you consume, so long you're not chugging it all down at one go, the excess you consume will either go to waste or it will be in store for tomorrow's workout and recovery. Now, hypertrophy is what we're trying to trigger in our muscles with the training and the worksheets that we've given you. Why have we done that? It's a form of training called isolated muscle training. So you focus on a particular muscle, you isolate working on that muscle, you work on that muscle from 2, 3, or 4 angles, or hit different angles or heads of that particular muscle. And by focusing on that and by doing the right volume and the right frequency and nailing the protein intake, you will grow that muscle effectively and sufficiently. All right, so that is the difference between strength and hypertrophy, the 2 forms of resistance training that we can do. Now, you might ask, well, do I have to do both? You know, this question has come up before and people ask, and the answer is yes. They're working on different muscles. Think of your heart as a muscle and think of your blood system and arteries as muscles. If you're not doing cardio, you're not training those. If all you're doing is resistance training, yes, you will be training your heart and your arteries, but not as effectively as you can with a good, steady, constant cardio. Now, endomorphs, which is, I'm somewhere between a meso-endo, but endomorphs have a very high sensitivity to carbohydrates and they quickly convert to fat storage. So they need to have a good portion of cardio. Mesomorphs need to have a good weighting between cardio as well as resistance training. And an ectomorph, they will be lean and struggle to put on mass and volume of the muscle, but they would be amazing at running, amazing at high-speed activity, at activity that requires a lot of agility and movement, and they will perform a lot better as an ectomorph, but they need to prioritize, if they want to change shape and strength, they need to prioritize resistance training. In fact, they should be doing resistance training 5 to 6 times a week, and they should be lifting heavy if they want to build muscle mass. And it doesn't retain for as long as it does, say, for a mesomorph or an endomorph. So you need to have that balance. You need to understand why and the importance of both. Now, we'll talk about types of diet, but the original meaning of the word diet For those of you that know French or Latin, there is the verb être, to be, right? Diet comes from di être, which is a way of being, which means a lifestyle. So the original meaning of diet is how you're living your whole lifestyle, from what you eat, to how you move, to how you sleep, to when you rise, to when you rest, to even the quality of your thoughts and things like your breath work and your relationships. That is the true definition of diet and lifestyle. But today, we think diet is just what you eat. And we have labels for this diet, like keto or paleo, and we attach paleo to that's how the Bushmen ate, the cavemen ate. Vegetarian. Some of us might be vegetarian for religious reasons or health reasons or compassion reasons or sustainability reasons, and we might also be vegan for the same. Some of us regionally, we know this people in this part of the world, we heard they do well, so hey, let's eat the Mediterranean diet. Or I know this guy, all he did is for X number of days, he ate raw, so we go for the raw diet, or low carb, or no sugar, gluten-free, or dairy-free. And some of these we have because intolerances have been formed over a particular period, and you have no choice but to have them. Now, whatever label you call them, the label doesn't make the difference. It's what's inside them. And what's really inside them is how many calories are you still getting from them? How much protein do you need? And most of them, if they're contributing to your health, will have a high protein or lean towards a higher protein. Most of these, if they're contributing to health and fat loss, they will lean towards low sugar, and they will have fewer or less GI, glycemic index carbs. They will be less processed. They will have less preservatives, and they will have fewer what we call non-food items. Non-food items are things like coloring that gets added to food that comes from a non-food source, preservatives that are chemicals that come from a non-food source, pesticides that make it into our food that were designed to kill off bugs and bacteria and locusts makes it into our particular food. Those are non-food items. The more non-food items are in the type of food that you're consuming, i.e. the more processed, the less effectively they're broken down and digested by natural stomach acids, by natural bacteria. And so that will have you contribute to a better, healthier diet. Again, we talk about accountability, right? All of these diets, regardless of the name or the label, you still need to track, right? You might say, I don't like tracking. But guess what? You're like, hey, I had one sandwich today and then I had 2 chapatis at lunchtime. You're not tracking it in terms of grams, but you know the quantity you ate. So you're tracking anyway. So if you really want to know what that converts to, you have to document the calories it converts to and the macros it converts to. And then timing, right? The timing, as we said earlier, timing makes a difference to your well-being. And the time of what you eat is, let's just say I ate a meal an hour ago, right? I'm now on a webinar. So there's a 2-hour gap or 3-hour gap before bedtime. In that 3-hour gap, depending on what I ate, if it's a quick breaking down food, it will predominantly be digested before I get to bed. Now, if after this webinar, I'm going and eating something, maybe 1,000 calories meal, and then I'm going to sleep, the first 3 to 4 hours of my sleep is not as deep because my digestive system is still running. And as it's running, right, my metabolism is, is not getting into a rested state, right? So we are not going into rest and digest. We're not getting to a recovery or repair mode, right? Because you're still digesting that particular food. Now, timing also brings about the topic of intermittent fasting. Now, some of you on the Friday surgery raised this or are doing this as a continuity from the last program. But what is intermittent fasting? Various types of intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is basically where you have what's called an eating window and a fasting window. Now, this clock here is showing you from 1 p.m. right up to 9 p.m. Imagine that's your eating window. That's where you can eat all these particular foods. Then from 9 p.m. at night all the way to the next day after lunch, 1 p.m., that translates to a 16-hour window. The 16-hour window, you can only hydrate with or consume 0-calorie stuff. So you could have water, you can have coffees, you can have teas without milk ideally, and that won't interrupt your fast. It will allow you to, if you're active, especially in that window, to tap into your glycogen, to break down your glycogen. If you deplete your glycogen, then you give going into fat loss a particular chance. What are the benefits of intermittent fasting? Well, many of them, first of all, stem from spiritual practices. But spiritual practices are also a form of science. There was a reason they were being done. Other than mind control, they're a form of cleansing. They're a form of allowing your digestive system to rest and recover. They're a form of triggering in your body what we call hormesis, which we spoke about in the last webinar, like going for ice baths, they allow a cleansing process in your body called autophagy, right? Autophagy is where dead cells start to be flushed out from your body or parts of your body, organs of your body. And as they're being flushed out, they're like going on a conveyor belt, and the healthy, good cells are picking bits of it and pieces of it and attaching them to the rest of that particular tissue or organ. It is promotes fat as a source of energy and allows you to also get good sleep. So sometimes those of you that struggle with sleep, intermittent fasting could be a good way to do it. Now, you could do it from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. as your eating window. Some people do a morning eating window. So they wake up at 6 a.m. and they're feeling famished, and they go from 6 a.m., say, up to 2 p.m. That's their eating window. Or 8 a.m. up to 4 p.m. is the eating window. Then from 4 p.m., after 4 p.m., they're having nothing. And they're fasting till the next morning, 8 a.m. So that's another way to do it. So we are going to invite you to try it out so you can discover it. Now, what can you consume during the fasting window? For intermittent fasting to be effective, the only thing you can consume are 0-calorie drinks, water. You could have sugar-free energy drinks as well if the caffeine and the vitamins in there stimulate you or fuel you or make sure you don't cramp or whatever. So you can have that. But these last two bullet points aren't counted as intermittent fasting. They will interrupt your intermittent fast. But if you're really struggling with the fast, don't just go for an ice cream. Don't just go for a big pack of nuts. If you're really struggling with your fast and you're like, I just need something, I'm feeling low on energy, I'm feeling weak, the first two things you can go for is a very low calorie vegetable smoothie or soup. Why? Because that veg smoothie or soup is very low calorie. So the whole drink could be 30 calories or 40 calories. You could have a good 250 to 500 ml veg-based smoothie. So no fruit in there. So there's no glucose in there. There's no fructose in there. It's only vegetable-based. The second one is a protein shake. And a protein shake, why? If you are especially fasting in your window and you are feeling cravings, something that suppresses craving or what triggers craving is a hormone called ghrelin. And what says we're full is a hormone called leptin. But by having protein, it pushes leptin up to say I'm full, and it also suppresses ghrelin and keeps the ghrelin low for long till your actual solid food eating window. So if you did have to break your intermittent fast and you're like, I just need something today, then go for a very clean, pure, isolate protein with water, and that would be a good protein shake for you to have. That said, one of the types of diet we saw was what we call keto. Now, what is keto? Keto is ketogenic diet, and a ketogenic diet, it works well with intermittent fasting. What people misinterpret with keto is because keto says you can eat fats, you can have loads of fats, but you've got to avoid carbs, you've got to keep your carbs very low, and you've got to have high protein. Now, unfortunately, what some people think is they see people doing keto and they're eating a lot of fried stuff or oils. And they're thinking, oh, I can have that. And so people have a lot of chips, French fries. They think they can have anything fried. They think they can have any good fats. But if those also have a high amount of carbohydrate in them, it will blow your ketosis. It will get you out of ketogenesis and it will not be keto. Now, keto, at a very small level, you'll have a very small quantity of berries or nuts. You'll have predominantly a good amount of green veg, which are very low calorie, but most of your diet will be of good high fat food and high protein food, right? And so that is something that is great about ketosis. What is not great about ketosis or ketogenesis is that you, first of all, have to keep your carbs very low. A really good keto diet should have your carbs at 20 grams, 20 to 30. Now, it's very easy, as you've seen with carbs, to go over 50, 60, even 100. So the moment you go over 20 to 30 grams or more, depending on your body weight, you're likely not going to be in ketosis. And it will blow your goal of fat loss. The other downside of keto diet is if you've been doing keto for a long time, you've seen great results, and then you take time out of keto. What's happened over that period is you've sensitized or desensitized your body to processing carbs and the insulin resistance and response to the carbs. Then when you introduce more carbs, suddenly your blood cannot handle that level of glucose being introduced to it. So it creates a lot of it going into storage. And people find that after they've been doing keto for years and loved it, when they come off it, they add the weight back so quickly and some, right? So they often sometimes might go back from where they started from. So that is one of the ways keto works. Even if you plan to lose fat, you will still require a calorie deficit. Just to explain what's happening with the keto, this particular image, traditional diet has higher carb, your glucose levels go into your body, that fuels your energy. When your glycogen drops, insulin releases glucose, insulin and glucagon is another hormone which releases stored glucose in your fat cells into energy. Keto diet, glucose levels fall because you're getting only good fats like an avocado. You get a lipase release, stored, and your fat cells are basically storing the energy. And when you need it, your liver instructs or creates this process of breaking down the stored fat and stored energy, and it releases energy through fat. Now, remember we said earlier in webinar 2, how many calories are there per gram of carbs? What we're looking at there is what you consume. But in addition to what you consume, it's also the carbs within you and the fat within you. If you trigger your fat loss, every gram of fat that you burn is giving you 9 calories of energy. Whereas every gram of carb that you break down or release or consume is only 4 calories of energy. Now think about 9 calories per gram. That's 2.2 times the amount of energy from keto. It's also why people love keto, because it's giving them a lot of energy, right? So 100 grams of fats is 900 calories. That's kind of sufficient for the whole day for some people. Whereas 100 grams of carbs is only 400 calories. And carb consumption triggers carb demand, and and triggers overconsumption. And that overconsumption leads to more glycogen going to store, which leads to more fat buildup. It's why we're trying to avoid having too much of the carbohydrates. That said, it is a wrap of webinar 4. As mentioned, you're going to get an email about the hundreds training plan. It starts next week, starts Monday. Next Monday, I'm not around, so somebody will be running my Monday session. But Tuesday and Thursday, I will be with you. Coach Jamie will be with you. If you're joining the live workouts. If you guys haven't been joining the live workouts, I recommend you do. If there at a time you can't do, please do them on catch up. It's great to share an update of having done that particular day's workout. And our workouts are designed for you to do it from home. All you have to do is order some weights at home, create some kind of home gym, or if you're staying in a block of flats where you have a particular gym or a gym nearby, you can still take your phone and play it on replay and do that workout. They're quite intense. They're quite intense because I know regular PTs who've been training in strength training traditional gym, right? And when they do our workouts, they really feel the pulse raise. They really feel their heart rate elevated. Mine today went up to 172. Now, as a 45-year-old, my max heart rate is round about there. So I was pushing right up to my max heart rate, which for me is good. That's a good, effective workout. My average was about 147, right? The important one is looking at your average. Obviously, it oscillates during the workout, but 147 was my average, which is at about 80% or 75% of my max HR, which means it was really good and intense workout. The second part of the assignment is, if you haven't already, alter MyFitnessPal macros if we've not adjusted yours, and you're going to take on intermittent fasting. So try out intermittent fasting for 2 weeks is what I recommend, right? And one of the ways, and while you do that, change your macros to 20 or 25%, and keep your carbs to 20 or 25%, and try to keep your carbs, like I said, 0.9 grams per kg of body weight. And if you're on Ancorer, this is an extra challenge, a bit of a push, right? So I'm inviting you between now and 2 weeks from now. So you have a 14-day window. Try a 5-day, 5 of those days. You could start tomorrow or start the day after tomorrow. 5 days of having 0 calorie from the time you wake up right up to 5 p.m., right? So that will mean if the last meal the other night before was at 9 p.m. and you're adding, you're fasting till 5 p.m., that's a 20-hour fast. That's a 20-hour fast. So that's quite a big push. Now, during that period, you can have sugar-free energy drinks if you need to. You can have pre-workout added to water to just keep you going. You can have black coffees, you can have teas, you can have water. If you're not feeling a slump in energy, you don't even need the caffeine if you by default are buzzing. But what you will find is 5 days, those of you that are committed to fat loss as an Ancora, you'll see some amazing things happen. So if you're a first-time FitBanker, please don't do this. If you're an Ancora, like we said at the start, we're asking you to perform at something that feels and occurs like ridiculous. So you might feel that it's challenging. And day 1 will be challenging, day 2 will be challenging, and day 3 will be challenging. I'm asking you to do this for 5 days. Day 4 and 5, you will be buzzing. Okay, so I'm asking you to do for minimum 5 days. If you want to go a bit over, you can. The next one is just an observation exercise. So
Sorry,
start
just
to
a quick one before we go to the next one. Why can't we do it if we're a first timer, that up to 5 p.m. fast?
Have you ever done fasting before? Intermittent fasting?
Yeah, normally I do it till about noon. I like the idea of a challenge till 5.
Look, you can try it. What we do like to do is if people are making a lifestyle change, we want it to be phased. So we don't want people to go from 0 to 100 and feel this is not easy, it's unsustainable. Because what will happen in 90 days of doing the program, if it's the first time you're doing this lifestyle change, you will kind of move from A to B. As an Ancora, we're trying to move you from B to C, right? So rather than going straight A to C, and then people, sometimes the mind says, this is too much. That was too much of a push. Not doing that again. Or what will happen is if you haven't learned the rest of what we're going to cover on the webinars, it's very easy to do something extreme. And then we go into what's called over rewarding, right? Overcompensation. So you think I did really great. I can now kill that ice cream. I can now go and have that muffin. So it's important we first learn what the rest of the webinars are. If you've never been part of the other webinars, which are working on other parts of your brain and your relationship to food, so that we don't turn what feels like too much of a push into self-sabotage, or we repel the experience, which is also not emotionally enjoyable if it's some form of stress. Third assignment is observation. So observe, watch, start to read food labeling, and think about, I want you guys to share, maybe some of you have some ideas, type now in the chat. What is a grandmother tale or that you were told? Like my mom would say to us, no running or sport or activity after lunch. So we were so conditioned to eat big lunches and then to chill around and sit around on a couch or sleep after we came back from school for about 2 hours before we were allowed into the yard to play. And that might have been because growing up in Africa, it's a very hot savannah sun as a kid. And 1 or 2 of us might have got nosebleeds or headaches. And so mom makes this rule with no scientific backing to it. And we just take it as gospel, right? And talking about gospel in webinar 5, we're going to look at how we form myths in our head that we've just inherited from what mom said or what the media said or what we experienced seeing our brother go through, like, oh, I don't want to have a nosebleed, so I'm not going to go for play right after sport. But you look at top athletes, they will eat very conservatively and more accurately and be able to play all day with a short rest. Maybe you'll sit for 10 minutes, but they'll get back into their activity. So understand how to efficiently use our body. But for now, I just want you to think about some grandmother's tales that you have. Like, hey, eat almonds and you'll be brainy, or whatever you might have been told growing up. So think about some of those myths you've been told. Then number 4, we looked at this earlier. I need you guys to calculate what's called your maximum heart rate. Calculate 90% of your maximum heart rate. So like I said, I'm 45. If anyone's 45 here, I'll be doing the math for you. But if I'm 45, it's 220 minus my age, right? Which is 175. 90% of that number I need to know. Remember, today I said I pushed my heart rate to 172. That was pretty high, right? 90% of that is 157. So when my heart rate is at 157, that day I'm triggering thermogenesis, right? And it needs to move between 0.6 to 0.9 in that range. But the 0.7 number for that is about 122 heart rate. So when your heart rate moves from 122 to 160, in that range, up and down, like I said, today's average for me was 147. If my average was 147 today, I was triggering thermogenesis. I've been experiencing fat loss. I've been experiencing EPOC, which means after my workout, I have excessive post-exercise oxygen consumption. And like I say, on the 5th Wednesday, fifth Wednesday is our day 30, but we have, sorry, it's going to be on Tuesday. Yeah, it'll be Tuesday for this challenge. So Tuesday, we have our day 30 updates, which is next week. And then webinar 5 is the following week, where it's a guest evening. So please do invite people. Now, part of the webinar 1, we looked at the phases of the program. And the third phase of the program before seasonality, we said, is leadership. We're looking at leadership. So there are coaches here who are coaches because they demonstrated leadership and some form of inspiring others in their life to take a positive action. One of the ways of seeing if you are effective at inspiring people is, can you have them actually take an act or an action? And one of the opportunities to do so is invite them to be inspired by you to show up to a guest webinar. So there's a guest webinar on webinar 5, webinar 6, but it's such an insightful one. It's such an eye-opener. Like when I was told to remove sugar from my diet, the first thing I did is I went to our local co-op and I bought maple syrup, I bought honey, because I'm like, damn, sugar is evil. Let me try without that sugar thing that this guy told me about. Not realizing all this maple syrup and honey I was having is converting to blood glucose and blood sugar anyway. So I had to realize what is actually non-sugar sweeteners and non-blood glucose spiking sweeteners. So those are some of the things we will look at in webinar 5, and such an eye-opener. I often invite coaches to play a game with your team, which is which team is going to have the most number of participants. There are 5 lives per group. Now, inspire and invite people to join because you've seen value and you think this could serve mom. Mom could be on this program because I saw somebody who reminded me on the webinar of mom, and mom's been dealing with her high blood pressure and her cholesterol. I would love for her to come and listen to this. Or my husband, who's constantly on this medication and he thinks it's about the stress at his work. Maybe he could join the webinar and realize actually he's doing nothing for his cardiovascular system. Maybe he could realize what he thinks is fresh and organic and straight from the bakery isn't fresh, organic, and straight from the bakery. And we will be debunking some of those myths, right? So please come to webinar 5. We will talk that. You all have to register, whether you are a guest, on this link. And remember, it starts at 6 p.m., not the normal 6:30 p.m. Now, inviting leaders to step up to being leaders. That's why we have the whole coaching body. It's our access to 1 billion lives. You are our access to 1 billion lives. But leadership and people that will actually lead and inspire another and take action in a world of apathy, where people just do what others do or don't do. Leadership is scarce because few people are willing to go through the discomfort required to lead. For those of you that are following me on social media, we as a family are going through some discomfort to lead, right? We've been dealing with a local community election, and there's been a lot of irregularities and controversy around it, and I was standing for a chairman position and I lost, but we have rocked the boat in this, and it's becoming quite confronting for us as a family interacting with society, because there was some irregularities and allegations made against us, which is really requiring us to take a bold stand and transform what's going on here in our community. But this scarcity of leaders is what keeps the monotony. It's what makes leadership valuable. It's uncomfortable to stand up in front of strangers. It's uncomfortable to propose an idea that might fail. It's uncomfortable to challenge the status quo. It's uncomfortable to resist the urge to settle. If you're not uncomfortable in your work as a leader, it's almost certain you're not reaching your potential as a leader. Seth Godin. So this is an invitation for you guys. That was, sorry, what we did in the last challenge. Gira, I'm not going to just assume that will be there. Can I allow you to to communicate whether you're doing something for next week? This was done in the last challenge, week 5, but I didn't update the slide. So you can let me know and let the challenge know whether you'll be doing something next Tuesday.
Yes, I will communicate, Ronnie, once I speak to the coaches and you as well.
Okay, awesome. So as a heads up, by the way, it may or may not be you. It could be some of the other coaches. But what we did in January is Mohini thought, let's create a Leaders Connect panel. So invited head of Trex, head of one of the adventure leads, which is Hina, Viera from the coaching body. So people get a sense of some of the other people within the organization, because when they're not actively coaching on a challenge, sometimes participants don't get a sense of who they are and vice versa. So this was like a little bit of a moderated panel conversation and people sharing their journeys. And it led to many people being inspired to continue their long haul game of their life transforming journey. On that note, guys, it is a wrap of webinar 4. I will stop the live stream and we'll take questions. Avni, is that a question?
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so I think you might have already said it in the seminar, but at the beginning you said that if you go above your carb, like for example, above your carb requirements. So say, for example, you
Yeah.
go to 150
Yeah.
in a day.
Yeah.
Is it possible to do then cardio and burn that carb? Or is it that it's already released into your blood, the sugar is there? Or can I?
Yeah, well, it will definitely release into blood. There will be a blood sugar spike, and then there will be an insulin spike. And when there's an insulin spike or multiple insulin spikes across the day, you trigger inflammation. So there's an inflammatory response. So you could be inflamed up to 6 hours after a high glucose spike or multiple spikes. Our body is in an inflamed state for up to 6 hours, and our immunity is even compromised in that period, right? Now, in a way, thinking single dimensional, yes, you could burn most of it if that consumption was spread out across the day, 150, but you're also moving across the day. So let's just say you're playing 36 holes of golf, and on that particular day, that will very easily translate to maybe, I don't know, 20,000 steps, maybe more, right? If you're doing that, or I don't know what a full day of golf is. Can you do 36 holes or 24 holes of golf, whatever that is? And now, if you're slow consuming across that and you're moving, kind of think of it as the glucose is coming in, but it's also not creating the spike because you're on a walk, right? So it's one of the ways to minimize. We're trying to avoid a blood glucose spike. So diabetics will know this. They have a continuous glucose monitor. If they overconsume carbs, their body isn't, the red light is flashing. There's a problem when the blood sugar is too high for too long. But the difference between us and diabetics is they know. They get the immediate response. What we don't get is the immediate response, but it's long-term accumulating. But our blood sugar will more or less respond the same or similar. Now, you can also do the math, which is, hey, I was meant to have 60 grams of carbs today, right? And for that, I have created, inside our plan, I want to create a 500 calorie deficit. So you've created your 500 calorie deficit, but then you went for 150. So you've now had 90 extra calories of carbs. Do the math. 90 times 4 calories is 360 calories overconsumed from carbs. If our standard goal, the FitBanker model, is to create a 500 calorie deficit, on that day you want to aim for an 860 calorie deficit. You're adding your 360 more to the 500. So you would need to do an additional active burn of 360. So that's quite a big day. So it can be done. And for those of you that say we went on a hike to Seven Sisters, you would have easily consumed 150 grams of carbs, but they also very easily burnt 1.5 to 2